Hey, this is Nachliel Selavan, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Torah Intermedia. Before you go on to watch the video of this virtual tour presentation or whatever it is, I just want to ask you to support this channel and to please click the red subscribe button on the bottom there, and if you can also click the notification. And that way, if you like this video, you'll be able to get notifications whenever I post a new video, and I'm trying to post it more and more. If you like, even leave a comment. I'd really appreciate it. And now, without further ado, let's enjoy the show.
Hey guys, welcome back. Great. All right, welcome back from your online written exam. I hope it went well. Scores are all coming in. You guys are in for a real treat today. Nachliel Selavan is a expert in the subject matter that he's going to be teaching you about. Gives tours all around the world, connecting artifacts to museums around the world, to Tanakh. And what's really cool about what you're going to do today is virtually you're going to get to tour not just one museum, but plenty of museums around the world with Nachliel, as he kind of takes you into Yeshayahu, a sefer that many of you guys plunged into for the Chidon Tanach in an entirely new way. You get to explore some really cool artifacts, explore museums around the world with Nachliel. The floor is his. I'll just tell you exactly, I'll tell you in advance, Nachliel wants questions. So the chat box is open. The chat is totally open. If you have questions for him as he's giving you his tour, totally feel free to ask. And hopefully at the end of the tour, you'll have a little bit of time to ask some questions verbally as well. The floor is yours, Nachliel. Thanks so much for being here. Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you, Dovi, and welcome everyone. In regards to Yerushalayim, I'm really excited to be doing this tour with the Chidon Tanach for the third year in a row. This time it's virtual, so it's going to be a bit different. In about 40 to 45 minutes, I'm not sure if I can get it in one meeting. I might manage to get more, but stick around for the next part at 4 o'clock, and we're going to be visiting not only museums, but also different parts on the planet. So it all depends on the subject. So let's get started. Just to introduce what we're about to do, we're going to be covering particularly one story in Sefer Yeshayahu Perek Zayin, which you're all familiar with. It has to do with Achaz and Retzin Melech Aram and Pekach ben Remaliah, the king of Israel. And we're going to really analyze that story, because that story is a very important one, a very powerful one, and we can really use that story to look at a lot of different areas of Tanakh, of history, of archaeology, and exciting places you can visit in museums and in Israel. So let's get started right away. So just as an introduction, this map you can see is just a screenshot from Google Earth. And these artifacts are artifacts that we're going to be seeing some of them and discussing them. So let's get started. I just see I'm going to keep my chat box open. Oh, hi, Orit. Okay. So this is the story we're going to be focused on. And I'm not going to be showing you too much text, but this is a very important one. So let's just take a look quickly at the story so we know what's going on. And the map on the left is going to be accompanying us a little bit later. So we have Achaz ben Yotam ben Uziyahu melech Yehuda. This is the time in which we're talking about. There is the story with Allah Retzin melech Aram ufekach ben Remaliah melech Yisrael Yerushalayim lemilchama aleh v'lo yachol yilachem aleh. So we have Retzin, the king of Aram, and Pekach ben Remaliah, the king of Israel, coming to fight against Achaz, who's the king of Yehuda, and they don't succeed. Now the story in Yeshayahu goes through the whole description about how Ephraim is going to be destroyed in a few years. It's going to be all overs for them. Yeshayahu goes with his son to talk to Chizkiyahu. We have that whole story with Pekach ben Remaliah, etc. And Hashem says, don't worry about them and all that. So that's a story you all know. But I really would like to give, a little bit more into this, and then hopefully as things go, you'll be able to ask questions. And I encourage you, if there's anything at all, I'm going to be checking the chat every few moments. So this is our initial story, okay? And at the end of the day, Achaz is saved, and he doesn't have to worry, and Retzin is killed, and Pekach is also killed. But what is all this story about? So I want to take a look at the map before we go into the actual, the Google Earth and look at this, just to know where everything is, okay? So here we have a map of the Fertile Crescent of the ancient Near East, or Mesopotamia. All familiar with this. This is a map which is from the Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem, which is a specific exhibit about the Al Yahudu documents, which I'm going to talk about in the second virtual tour, which are these documents and contracts from Jews who are doing business and corresponding after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. It's a really, really cool collection of documents we're really lucky to have. So all of this is what we're going to be talking about this area. So in terms of Ashur, can you all see just on the top where Ashur is? Like somewhere like towards the middle up to the right. You see there's Ashur and there's the city of Nineveh. You're all familiar with the story of Nineveh, I'm sure, right? Where do we know Nineveh from? Some of you have been on my tours before. I recognize some of you. So right in the chat, just so we kind of make a connection. Very good. Excellent. Isaac, Gabriel, very good. All right, very good. Yonah. So Nineveh is the capital of the kingdom of Ashur at some times. Sometimes it's Ashur, sometimes it's Kalach. Capitals do move over time. Now let's take a look at the bottom left of the map. We have Shomron, which is of course the capital of Malchut Israel, and we have Yerushalayim, which is the capital of Malchut Yehuda. And I want you to find where is the capital of Retzin, the king of Aram. Which is his capital? Okay, the capital of Retzin. I'm not sure if this is more in Melachim, Damascus, Damasek. Yeah, and you can write this to everyone, by the way. You don't have to write it to me privately. So Damasek. So the point is to see where this is on the map. Now, I'd like to explain why this is such an important event and what exactly happened. So let's take a few steps to introduce this before we go in. First of all, just so we know who are the kings of Yehuda and Israel, and then who are the kings of Ashur. This is going to be very helpful when you want to say who came first, right? Achaz, Uziyahu, etc. What's going on? That's the whole beginning of Sefer Yeshayahu. So let's start with Malchut Yehuda. We have the names here. Hope you can all see it on the screen. And so Uziyahu, Yotam, Achaz, these are the opening kings we hear about in Yeshayahu Perek Aleph in the whole beginning. And Achaz is the king that we are talking about. And those years, 727, etc., you can just add 2020 to that and you have the date. So it's, it's 47 years ago. Okay. And now on Malchut Yisrael, on the other hand, these are the kings we are talking about. And our story is with Pekach ben Remaliyahu. And we are basically just a couple of decades before the destruction of Shomron, the exile of the 10 tribes. It's almost all over from Malchut Yisrael. It's almost over. And that's exactly what Yeshayahu is telling him, right? So let's just take a look at how the story shows it from the other side. So this is the story we had in Yeshayahu. We're back to the exact same story which we saw. And in Pasuk Daled, Hashem says to Chizkiyahu, Hishamer v'hashket al tira u'levavcha al yirach mishnei zanvot ha'udim ha'ashenim ha'ele. Don't worry about these smoking sticks of fire. It's just smoke. Like we're talking about Lag BaOmer is coming up. This is like an image which we can think about, these smoky sticks, right? But there's nothing really there. So they're almost done. Retzin and Pekach ben Remaliyahu, okay? But I want to show you the other side of the story, which is in Melachim Bet Perek Tetzayin. And just to see this is the exact same story, but take a look at the differences. So take a look for a moment. Pasuk Hey, very, very similar. אז יעלה רצין מלך ארם ופקח בן רמליהו לירושלים מן המלחמה, ויצורו על אחז ולא יכלו להילחם. So I'm not doing the comparison here because I don't want to overextend. This is not what we're testing on, right? But the difference is there's either just Yerushalayim or al Achaz specifically. So what does it mean that they're coming to besiege Achaz? They're not trying to destroy Yerushalayim. They're trying to kill Achaz, specifically Achaz. And here's what's very interesting. You learn why, like what's going on in the region. So Retzin ba'et ha'yeshiv Retzin melech Aram et Eilat la'Aram va'inashelet ha'Yehudim me'elot. So there's all these different areas that Retzin is taking away from Malchut Yehuda, and this is not good. So what does Achaz do? And this is the really cool part. Vayishlach Achaz malachim el tiglat pileser melech Ashur lemo avdecha uvincha ani. So he sends a message and he says, save me from the king of Aram and the king of Israel who are coming to attack me. And of course he gives him kesef and zahav and tribute. Now, how many of you have seen the Star Wars A New Hope, the very, very first? It's called episode 4. When I grew up, that was really the only one, right? So I see a few raised hands, people who have seen it. Right, so there's that very opening scene where the small spaceship with Princess Leia is able to escape, right? And it's caught by the Imperial Star Destroyer. It's captured, right? I see we have a raised hand. Yes, you can speak. No? Okay. What's that? Okay, fine. So Princess Leia manages to send this R2-D2, that little droid, with a message that manages to get past the attack of the Empire, and that message gets to Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that's really how the Resistance survived, and that's how they were able to destroy the Death Star and to really have a fighting chance, because of that one droid that managed to escape when almost everything was lost. Now, I want you to think about, even if you haven't seen Star Wars, I think the idea is clear that when the enemy is attacking you and one messenger manages to get away and to get to your allies and to help fight back, that's what we have here. Ahaz is completely surrounded by two other kings, right? He's surrounded by, I want you to just take a look at how that looks. So I'm looking back at the map. So look at this map. Just take a look at how that works. We have Yehuda on the south, right? On top of him is Israel, and further to the top and to the east, to the right, is Aram. He is completely surrounded, right? He has no way he can't get out. He's doomed. But he manages to have one messenger who manages to slip through in the nick of time, to slip through the grips of Aram and Israel, going through enemy territory, all the way to the far, far, far distant kingdom of Ashur. And that kingdom comes from the back and completely destroys Aram and Israel, and they didn't see it coming. So think about how powerful this was, that he was able to ally. You know, there's a famous picture of a small fish eaten by a bigger fish, eaten by a bigger fish, eaten by a bigger fish. Think about it like that. So Israel and Aram are together attacking small little Yehuda. But Yehuda calls the big fish Ashur, who comes and eats up Aram and Israel. And that's basically what happens. So I'd like us just to appreciate the impact of this tactical move, this brilliant move of being able to bring in somebody from behind them, somebody who's bigger and stronger, and to attack them and destroy them. And I'd like us to appreciate who Ashur was. So let's just quickly go back to where we were. And here is another pasuk in Yeshayahu, which is going to introduce us to Ashur. So how do we hear about Ashur in terms of their role? Ho Ashur shevet api, umatehu biadam za'ami. Now we know what a shevet and a mateh is, right? It can mean two different things. It can mean like the shvatim, like the 12 shvatim, but it can also mean a head of a shevet, which is like the head of staff, like an actual stick. It's either a staff or a person who's like in the administration, also called staff. It's just interesting that shevet and mateh, both in English and in Hebrew, mean the same thing. It can either mean like a tribe, right? Or it can actually mean a staff. Like the word staff means both. It's really cool. So Ashur is basically the weapon in which Hashem is going to punish Israel and Yehuda over time. And that's really, really cool. So let's take a look just briefly about who were the kings of Ashur, and then we're going to go into the museums and see some of this stuff. So this is a very famous black statue called the Black Obelisk of Shalmaneser. That's not for today. I want to just show you these kings. So when we are talking about Ashur, we're talking specifically about Ashur as they became a new kind of kingdom. They were now an empire. They're a very vastly expanding and powerful and conquering kingdom. And they're basically the new big bully on the block, right? They're the unstoppable force who are going to last for a little over 100 years until Babel becomes stronger than them. So the first king to become what the Neo-Assyrian, like the new level, the new stage of Assyria, is Tiglath-Pileser the third, right? And this is the one who we are talking about. And after these, just so you know, because these names do come up in other parts in Yeshayahu and otherwise, Sargon comes up in Yeshayahu Yutet, that's not in the curriculum, but Sargon is also one of the kings who exiled the 10 tribes. Shalmaneser is, and San Gerif, of course, you're going to learn a lot about that, even though that's more in Melachim, in terms of it's not in this part of Yeshayahu that you're studying, but San Gerif and Esal Chadon. So these are, and Ashurbanipal is also mentioned in the book of Ezra. His name is Esnapar Rabba Viakira. So he has a very funky name there, but that's not important for now. So these are the kings we're going to be talking about, specifically Tiglath-Pileser. Okay? So this is the kingdom of Assyria. This green area is the Assyrian Empire at its height. The lighter green part, the wider part, is at the end of the Assyrian Empire. Before they were destroyed, they became really powerful. They controlled Egypt. They controlled almost all the way to Persia, the Persian Gulf, parts of Turkey. It was a massive empire. And the question is, how exactly did they do it? So before we look at that, I want to take you into a museum. And let me just switch screens. Hang on. Okay, wrong screen. Okay. Okay, so here we are on Google Maps. First of all, you get to see all of this massive area, but I would like to take you to some stuff that was excavated from this area, from Ashuru up here. So you have a reference to where Ashuru is today. You're talking about northern Iraq, southern Iraq, Baghdad. This is all Babylon. So this is the area that we are looking at. Nineveh is somewhere around here, near Mosul. So let's go into the British Museum. This is my favorite part. Okay, the British Museum. I'm going to take you really quickly straight into the room that we want to see. If you're familiar with Google Street View, that little character, that yellow guy, you know, you click on him and then all the areas you can see sort of light up. So let's move into here. Okay. Okay, we are now in the Palace of the Assyrian Empire. This is from Nineveh. These are all pieces from Nineveh. I want to take you to one specific story. I just want you to get an idea of the pictures of what's going on in Nineveh. I'm going to go really straight there. I'm going to go straight to the Palace of San Gerif really quickly. Take a look at this for a moment. These two big statues, if you've been with me to the Met, you've seen them in the museum too. These are sort of mythological protectors of the king who's in the palace behind them. So they're these big protecting creatures. They're like lions and bulls. They're really cool. I want to take you into Assyria. Here's another very big ones. These are, again, divine protectors. This is palace decorations from the Assyrian kingdom, from the Assyrian Empire. And I'm taking you straight into San Gerif's throne room. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to show you a few different things here. Okay, so first of all, a very important story, which we're going to talk about soon, which it relates to the Assyrian Empire. When they came a little bit later to the son of Achaz, his name is Chizkiyahu, and they attacked Yehuda because Chizkiyahu rebelled. So there's a very important part of that conquest, which was they came and they tried to destroy Lachish. One second. Is this a different palace than the one in the Met? Yes. Isaac is asking, is this a different palace than the one in the Met? The answer is yes. The palace in the Met is about 100 years earlier than this one, from a different city. This one is from San Gerif, and this is from Nineveh. So you're looking at stuff from the palace. They're all pretty similar, just like the ancient Egyptians, built in a pretty similar fashion. You know, it's the same style. So just the capture of Lachish, I want you to see some of the Assyrian weapons that they used. And these are weapons that were actually collected from their battle against Chizkiyahu. So these were collected in Lachish, right? So take a look. These are these little stones here. These are sling stones. There's little arrowheads sitting here and all kinds of other things. The prism isn't here right now. It's on loan. And okay. And I wanted you to see their warfare. And then we're going to go into it a little bit more. So look at this guy. That's actually more than one guy. You can see that there's an archer, but there's two archers, one behind the other. And they do a lot of this. So let's take a look at a few more examples and see how this is important to us. Sec. Here we go. So we have here more archers, but it's going to be even cooler when you look up close. And I want to take you specifically to the story. This picture is kind of showing you a colorful depiction of the city of Lachish. It's not exactly what it looked like, but we can actually go to Lachish today and see it. And I might be able to jump into there for a minute. And it's showing you the Assyrian destruction of Lachish. Now, how do we know about the Assyrian destruction of San Gerif when it came to attack? Which is because of this story, because of the Tanakh, and because of the site of Lachish, and because of the things that Chizkiyahu built in Yerushalayim. Like, we have so much information about this. So here's the short story, and I'm going to start from here. San Gerif is the king of Assyria, right after the kingdom of Israel is destroyed, and Chizkiyahu rebels against him. Now, what does it mean to rebel? How do you rebel against an empire? Let's hear some answers. Chizkiyahu rebels against the mighty Ashuru. How do you do that? What does a rebellion look like? Okay, I'm seeing answers coming in. Not pay taxes, don't pay the tax. don't pay tax, refuse taxes. All right, you guys are pretty much on key. So homage, yeah, coin your own money. That's a very interesting one. David, nice to see you. Well, okay, so these are all very interesting things. It happens to be that in the time of Chizkiyahu, we don't have any evidence of coins, but we do have other things. So generally, when you would rebel against the kingdom and make your own kingdom, you would always make money with your name on it. So that's fair, just Chizkiyahu didn't do that. He did other things. Fine. Now, fighting against Assyria means sending troops that would be powerful enough to fight the Assyrian Empire. Not exactly so likely. But if you say, I am going to stop paying taxes, they're going to come for you and get taxes. So if there's one thing, if you know the government's going to come after you, it's taxes. So that's what Chizkiyahu had to worry about. And so you have to make some sort of insurance, which means he made an alliance with Mitzrayim, with Egypt, as we know, which is why, if you remember, Rav Shakeh says to him, how can you count on Mitzrayim? They're mitshenet kaneh ratzutz. They're like an empty staff of reed. You lean on them and they'll just puncture your hand. You can't count on Mitzrayim. They're not trustworthy, right? So basically, Mitzrayim was like next to home. And so if I don't pay taxes to the faraway Assyria, Mitzrayim is going to help me because I'm paying Mitzrayim and that's cheaper and that's better and they're going to come here faster. So that's the typical kind of thing you would do when you want to rebel. Excellent. Now Chizkiyahu rebels and San Gerif gathers his army and he has all of these processions of warriors who are coming towards Yehuda and all these little cities which had the audacity to rebel against them. And here they are all coming towards Yehuda, towards Lachish. And what we have here, I'm going to move up close, is showing us how they assembled and destroyed the city. And they actually destroyed Lachish, and I'm going to talk about that soon. But look at this long, long, long line. Let's try to take a look at what's going on in this picture. These are the Assyrians who are fighting against a Jewish city, which is a little bit south of Jerusalem. And it's a big, powerful city. And before you destroy Yerushalayim, you're first of all going to destroy its cities outside, so to cut off its defenses and all that, right? So here they are. They're moving up. Now, can you identify what this thing is here? What is this big thing that's being pushed up a ramp towards the city? It's a very interesting thing, and it's going to blow your mind when you realize what this is. The Assyrians invented tanks. Not tanks like today, this is 2,700 years ago, but they invented these big monster machines which are pushed by many people up a ramp. Now look, let's take a look at what's going on inside. This is really cool. So here's a guy who is holding a bow and arrow. There's an archer on top of this tank, okay? Now the tank has to be protected, right? There's people behind it with arrows, shooting with arrows to cover it as it advances. There's this rod protruding out of the tank. That's called a battling ram, which comes and rams into doors or pokes into fortification walls and crumbles them so they fall down. And here's all these rocks falling down. So what do you think the people on the tower, the defenders on the battlements, are going to do when they see this tank? They're going to throw flaming torches onto it. Can you see the torches falling down? All these guys? Now here's the cool thing. The Assyrians thought about that. They have a guy inside here. You see him sort of standing backwards. He's pouring water onto the rod to put out the fire. You see the water here pouring down? Isn't that cool? Now the Assyrians invented this 2,700 years ago. The guy's pouring water onto the stick to keep the fire off of it. This is really cool. Now, if you want to see some of the really gross things that the Assyrians did, let me see where it is. So in order to really scare and demoralize the people who are in the city, they would actually impale people, like put them on here. They would take people like other Jews, which they just killed, and impale them on sticks to scare everybody in the city and make them really, really scared. And so the Assyrians were really mean, were really nasty. Now, another thing you see what's going on, look at all these layers and layers of soldiers. There's people here with these long sort of body length shields, and next to them is an archer. So I have a shield and I'm protecting my friend who's shooting next to me. I mean, this is a very sophisticated kind of army. And one more thing that's going on is, of course, galut, is, of course, deportation. And what the Assyrians did is that they would take people and kick them out of their home to other places, right? That's what they did to the 10 Shabbatim, like we know about this. And here they are, mostly women and children being sent into exile. Now, this city was eventually destroyed. And who destroyed it? San Gerif. And I want to show you San Gerif himself. So this is showing you the rest of the procession everybody going in galut. You see these trees, you can look carefully, it looks like it's grapevines. They are all going into galut a long, long, long way on wagons with children here and all of their belongings, and they're all being captive, sent into captivity. Now these people are all bowing down, these little Jews here. Of course, it's caricatures, it's not like really portraits. And here they are bowing down before the king who's sitting on the throne. Look at him. Now, how do we know who this is? How can you tell? Can you see any indication that would tell you who it is? We'll look up here. Here is an inscription in Akkadian, cuneiform, and it's saying here, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, king of the universe, sits on his throne, and the spoils of Lachish are paraded before him. Something like that. Now, Lachish was a very powerful city. And after it was destroyed, San Gerif goes to attack Yerushalayim, and he of course fails, and he doesn't succeed, and he goes back home. But he decorates his throne room with the massive city which he destroyed, and this is in his actual throne room, and it was brought from Nineveh into the Brooklyn Museum, so the British Museum. So it's really cool. Now look at his face. What happened to his face? This is a really cool thing. In the ancient world, people believed that the statues of kings had power, right? So if you wanted to destroy the king's power or their memory, you break off their face. Now this was probably broken off 2,800 years ago, 2,630 years ago, when Nineveh was destroyed by the Babylonians, by Nebuchadnezzar and so on. So when they destroyed it, the soldiers came in and they just broke off the face. Why? That will destroy his power. I don't have time to do anything else. We're setting the city on fire, and they burnt Nineveh, actually. So they just broke off his face because they wanted to destroy his power and his memory. This is kind of a cool thing that they would do, right? And here's some servants behind him, fanning him, sitting here on his chair, and everybody's coming and bowing down before him, and he's the king. So he's sitting on his throne. So that's telling us a little bit about Assyria, okay? Now I'm gonna jump back into our slideshow, and I wanna talk about two things, and then we're gonna go into the Israel Museum, okay? So how did the Assyrian Empire become so powerful? Well, this is a kind of a cartoon of a library, but there's three things that the Assyrians did which made them better than any kingdom that ever existed before them. The first thing that they did was they kept records. They took notes of everything. So if you want to run an empire, you have to keep records and keep track who's paying taxes and what did the kings do, and write stories and write down all these ancient Mesopotamian stories are all recorded in these libraries. So that's a cool thing that they did. But another thing they did is innovation and battle tactics. So this is just an example. Here's battle tanks and the stuff that we saw that they're doing, like they're attacking another palace, another city, and there's people here impaled on spikes. I mean, it's pretty terrible. Now, I want to give you a metaphor from sports just to understand what was so unique about the Assyrian Empire. Because we've seen all kinds of things. They had archers, they had battle tactics, they had siege tactics, they had psychological warfare by scaring people. I mean, all of these different things that they did. I want to give you an example. You actually grew up in a world in which sports is done in a method that's called sports analytics, but this actually was something that was invented fairly recently, and that was with the Oakland Athletics, and then later on the Boston Red Sox used this method in order to win the World Series after, I think, 80 years. So I'm going to explain it really briefly. Sports analytics, or for short, it's called Moneyball. So sports analytics basically means that I'm going to find the players who have the best strength in different areas and put together a smart team. And so this guy always gets home runs. This guy's a good swinger. This guy's a good this, a good that. And instead of paying a lot of money for the best players, you can make a winning team on a budget. And this is what helped the Red Sox get to the World Series. This is called sports analytics, and there's free agents. In other words, you can move people around between teams, and it's just like free agency. This is how sports is done today. But this was invented fairly recently, and it's called Moneyball. Now, what I would like to explain to you is that what the Assyrians did to warfare is what Moneyball did to sports. The Assyrians changed warfare the same way that sports analytics changed the way sports is played today. And so instead of having just a lot of soldiers just running at a city, the soldiers of the Assyrian Empire had people from all different parts of the empire with different specialties and had a very specialized army where everybody's an expert in different things. And so they had a very smart army, and that's where they were able to conquer the world. And one last thing that they did, and we're going to go straight into the Israel Museum, is mass deportation, galut. So we talk about the 10 tribes, right? They're all lost. And we don't really know where they are. Some of them were found, some of them are not. It's a confusing subject, right? But how is it that the kingdom of Yehuda, which was sent into galut by Nebuchadnezzar and sent into galut by Titus and Vespasian in the Second Temple, we came back, we're still here. And how is it that the 10 tribes didn't? That's because of the way the Assyrians shuffled people around the empire so that they can't find their way back home. And so that they can't gather together with the people from their country and say, hey, let's rebel and let's go back home. You can't do that because they mix you up so well in the empire to make sure you can't run away and you can't gather with people you know. It's sad and it's terrifying. And that's what the Assyrians did. They mixed people up all over the place. Nobody else did that. The Babylonians sent us to Babel and then we came back, right? They didn't mix us up. Okay, so now I'm going to go take you into the Israel Museum. I'm taking you into one little spot of the Israel Museum, just a small thing, because our time is short. I'm going like this, Israel Museum. Okay, the Israel Museum. So I'm taking you to one room, which is a room which deals with San Gerif, okay, with Chizkiyahu. So this room, you're seeing here a copy of the Lachish reliefs, which we just saw in the British Museum. We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about two things. This jug and this little hexagon, 6-sided cylinder. And I'm sure you recognize these weapons of war from the Assyrian Empire. We saw them in the British Museum. These ones were actually found in Israel, in Lachish. Now, this prism, that's what it's called, I'm gonna move up close, is actually one of 3 copies that are complete. And there's 3 whole ones in the whole world. There's a few broken pieces, but these are the whole ones, which are San Gerif writing about his capture of Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda in Yerushalayim. This is in his own words. And he's saying he captured Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda in his city like a bird in a cage. I captured him like a bird in a cage. Now, Chizkiyahu was not destroyed. Yerushalayim was not destroyed. So this is very interesting. Why would San Gerif say he captured him in a city like a bird in a cage, but he didn't destroy Yerushalayim? Why would he say that? Well, he doesn't want to really sound like he lost, right? Like, no, he's not going anywhere. I captured Yerushalayim. Yeah, but you didn't really destroy it, right? So you come back to Nineveh and you want to say, look what I did to the mighty kingdom of Yehuda. I destroyed Yerushalayim. I didn't destroy Yerushalayim. I destroyed Lachish. What's Lachish? Well, you'll hear about it. It's important, okay, if you say so. In other words, you take what you won and you make a big deal about it, and you take what you lost and you say, well, it wasn't such a big deal, right? It's a very cool thing. So just so you know, this San Gerif prism, there's one here in the Israel Museum, one in the British Museum, and one in Chicago in the Oriental Institute. I got to see all 3 of them within 2 months, a couple years ago. But I want to talk to you about this jar, okay? This jar, I want you to see what size it is because that's important. This jar was put together piece by piece, and there's another one right here. 1 second. Right here. Now, these jars are very, very important to us because they were found in Lachish, they were found in Yerushalayim, they were found in all these cities of Yehuda from the time of Achaz, who we just learned about, and his son Chizkiyahu. That's who they're from. Now, what would you do with this jar? What would you put in it? Just guess. This is going to be important. This is about 3 feet tall. Okay, it's a pretty big jar. See, where's the chat? Okay. Water, okay. What else? Documents, I like that. Scrolls, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls they were put in clay. Look at the shape of it. You know that the shape means it can't stand, okay? So if you have it in that kind of shape, that means it's meant to do something specific, okay? It's not meant to stand or you put inside a stand. You can maybe put them one inside the other with the conical parts, the sharp parts facing each other so you can save space and transport them maybe, but it's definitely for storing something, okay? Now, this is actually used for storing wine or oil or grain or stuff like that. Probably oil and wine, like expensive stuff, okay? Now, here's the cool thing and why these are important. I'm gonna take you back here. This is from the Israel Museum's website. And here I'm just zooming into the handle, and it says in ancient Hebrew, some of you were in the museum with me, you saw one of these up close, but you're gonna see more of them here because we're doing this virtually. There's a beetle with wings on it, which is a very Egyptian symbol. And it says on it in ancient Hebrew, in the Hebrew that we used in the first Beit HaMikdash, Lamelech Chevron. And I put it on the top so you can see. Lamelech Chevron. Now, these jug handles have 4 different names of cities that have been found on them. We have Chevron, we have Lamelech Mamshit, Lamelech Zif, and Lamelech Socho. That's what all of these say. If you look at the second one from the top, you can see that kind of like a mem and a mem a little bit, like the letter M, and then there's like a shin, like a W looks like a shin, and the T looks like an X. That's just a T, that's Mamshat. And then on the bottom there's Zif. You're familiar with the city of Zif from when Shaul runs away from, David runs away from Shaul. And then, and Socho, like the story of David and Goliath happens next to Socho and Azekah. So what is this all about? What is happening here? And the key is that either Achaz or Chizkiyahu stamped on these jars, which we said store important food things, and they say Lamelech and the name of a city. Like, what's this about? Here's a whole bunch of them. This is a picture from the Harvard Semitic Museum. This is in Boston. So what is this about? And we're almost done, and we're going to open up for questions, okay? So what is this about? What is happening here? So this is really, really cool, okay? If the king has to stamp into a jar that has expensive food in it and say, this is the king signing on, and this is the city of Socho or Mamshit or Zif or Hebron, what is he saying? And here's what's cool. If you are under Achaz says to Tiglat-Pileser, I want you to save me from these other kingdoms, and I will be your servant. Avdecha ubinchani. I'll be your servant and I'll be your son. Like, I'll be part of the family. I want you to protect me. So how do you become part of an empire? Well, remember how you rebel? You stop paying taxes. This is paying taxes. How do you pay taxes? Taxes isn't cash. Tax is product, right? You collect 10%, let's say, I'm just making up a number, 10% of all of the oil produced, 10% of all of the wine produced, 10% of all of the apples, 10%, and you gather it in jars, and the king has to sign on it in the city that it was collected, because we now have an administration. We have to run Malchut Yehuda under the Assyrian Empire, and we're paying taxes. And at this point, Chizkiyahu, or Achaz and Chizkiyahu basically have to have an administration where they collect taxes, and then they trade it for money, and they give the money to the Assyrian Empire, okay? So this is how you pay taxes. So that's what's really cool. So when Chizkiyahu stops paying taxes, well, we know he's been collecting taxes. Malchut Yehuda has been collecting taxes for a while. They have a way to do it. So that's the one. And last thing, and then we're going to have questions, is this. I want to end with this. This was discovered several years ago. And look what it says on it. Lechizkiyahu Achaz Melech Yehuda. Belonging to Chizkiyahu, the son of Achaz, king of Yehuda. Now, how cool is that? We learned about Achaz in the beginning, right, in Perek Zayin. This is his son Chizkiyahu, and we spoke about how Chizkiyahu rebelled against San Gerif, and San Gerif came and attacked him, and he was saved, but Lachish was destroyed, so we saw a little bit of that. And this is Chizkiyahu's own seal, own stamp. He stamped into a piece of clay to close a letter. Unfortunately, we haven't found the ring of Chizkiyahu. Wouldn't that be cool? But we found something that he stamped into. He pressed into a piece of clay, and that's how you wrap it around a letter. And the letters, of course, didn't survive, unfortunately. It's very hard for leather or papyrus to survive. Very, very rare. And so this is Chizkiyahu. And look at the Egyptian symbols on it. Isn't that cool? There's this, the kind of the cross with the hoop on the top. That's called an Ankh. Like King Tut is Tut Ankh Amon. Ankh means life. So Chizkiyahu had the Egyptian symbol of life on his seal, as well as a sun with wings, which is also an Egyptian symbol for health, because you know Chizkiyahu was very sick, and there was a nest, and he healed. So it's a fascinating story, but we really just got a small taste of archaeology that relates to San Gerif, Achaz, that relates to Yehuda, to Ashur, to Malchut Yisrael. There's so much more. I just wanted to give you a little taste of it. And at this point, I'm going to end the screen share, and I'm going to open up for questions. You can unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question or any comments. Duches, how are you doing? Tagid mashu. Okay. Well, if no questions or comments, I'm going to give you time to think. No pressure. We have a few more minutes. But then remember, at 4 o'clock, sign back on. We're having another tour of several museums and places which have to do with Persia. A lot of really, really cool stuff. So I hope you can join for that one. And some of it's going to be related. But in any case, thank you very much for joining. Appreciate it very much. Let me see. Oh, we have some questions. Okay. Why do you think studying archaeology is important for understanding Tanakh? Oh my. I'm taking that for granted that I didn't even talk about it. It's so amazing how many things you can see. And when you see the map and you see the things that you find, like the Palace of San Gerif, and you see how he decorated it with a story from Tanakh, you realize that that story was a big deal. And when you read that story in Tanakh, you don't really pay attention to it. When you're reading Melachim Bet about Rav Shakeh coming to threaten Chizkiyahu, he mentions, he's on Lachish. Now, you don't really think that that's a big deal. So archaeology helps us really appreciate Tanakh a lot better. And besides, it's cool to see something with a name like Chizkiyahu, Achaz. That's really cool to see, right? You're like, wow, these are real people. And we found this next to your neighborhood. And, it's really cool. Yes, questions. You should be able to unmute yourselves. Yes, Sarah, Hello?
What does Sanchez in his documents? Does he give any reason for why he wasn't successful in the capture of Yerushalayim?
That's the $1 million question, because the Navi says that there was a Malach Hashem that struck him and 185,000 of his soldiers were dead, and then he just left with whoever remained from the army. We don't know how many, went back to Nineveh. We don't really know. He doesn't give a reason why. He just says that he taxed Chizkiyahu a certain amount of money, and that Chizkiyahu that is actually paid him that same amount. We have the same story in the prison that we saw, and in the Navi, the same amount of gold and silver that he had to pay him. But what we do see from San Gerif is that apparently he made his point. Chizkiyahu is not going to rebel again. He's going to keep on paying taxes. He's still paying taxes to Ashuru. Ashuru is not worth it for them at this point to invest so much in destroying Yerushalayim. Like, the point was made, and you don't want to step, like, you have to understand, Malchut Yehuda was almost completely destroyed. It was almost done. When Chazal say that Chizkiyahu could have been Mashiach, and San Gerif could have been like the last war, this is serious. Like, it was almost all over. Chizkiyahu was seeing it all over before his eyes, and he was saved b'nes. And he should have sung about it. He should have said Shirah, as the Gemara says. And had he done that, he could have been Mashiach. So it was a tremendous, tremendous devastation. And I guess at that point, with whatever the losses of San Gerif were, he said, like, okay, I made my point. It's not worth it for me to spend more money on this. I got it. He got it, and he goes back home. But he still controls the area. All right, thank you very much, everyone.